Spring 146 BC, Publius Cornelius Scipio Aemilianus stands before the burning ruins of what was once the greatest trading city in the Mediterranean, and he is weeping. But these are not tears of regret. The Roman commander is crying because he knows that what he has just unleashed upon Carthage will one day be unleashed upon Rome itself. Behind him, the screams have finally stopped. After 6 days and 6 nights of systematic slaughter, the streets have fallen silent. 400,000 men, women, and children have been erased from existence, and the civilization that gave the world the alphabet, advanced navigation, and purple dye has been methodically deleted from history. This is not a story about ancient warfare. This is about something far more disturbing, something that your history books desperately tried to sanitize behind marble columns and tales of noble senators, because the same empire that built the Pantheon and gave us concepts of law and order was simultaneously perfecting the science of mass extermination with a precision that would not be matched for 2,000 years. You think you know Rome. You picture gladiators and aqueducts, Caesar and Cleopatra, the glory of an empire that brought civilization to the barbarian world. But what if I told you that behind every triumph, behind every monument, behind every road that connected the known world there, was a foundation built on systematic terror, so calculated, so deliberately cruel, that medieval warfare looks merciful in comparison? The Romans did not stumble into brutality. They weaponized it. They studied it. They perfected it into a machine so efficient that entire nations would surrender at the mere whisper of a Roman legion approaching their borders. This was not the random violence of conquest. This was state-sponsored extermination, celebrated in the Senate, recorded with pride by their own historians, and considered completely legal under Roman law. Here is what will disturb you most. The Romans kept detailed records of their atrocities because they were proud of them. Senators competed to see who could report the highest body counts. Generals advanced their political careers by boasting about how many civilians they had slaughtered, how many cities they had burned, how many cultures they had erased. The phrase odorant dum metuant was not just a saying, it was official state policy. Let them hate us, as long as they fear us. Conservative estimates suggest that Roman military campaigns resulted in the deaths of over 15 million civilians. During the Republic and early Empire periods alone, 15 million human beings systematically eliminated by the civilization that claimed to bring peace and order to the world. Roman engineers, the same brilliant minds who designed the Colosseum and the Forum, spent equal time developing siege equipment specifically intended to maximize civilian suffering. They understood that terror was not a byproduct of war. Terror was the weapon, and they wielded it with scientific precision. Before we go deeper into this darkness, if you're the kind of person who wants to understand history as it truly was, not as we wish it had been, hit that subscribe button, because this channel dives into the stories that make us uncomfortable, the truths that challenge everything we thought we knew, and believe me, what comes next will change the way you see one of history's most celebrated empires forever. The destruction of Carthage was not an isolated incident of battlefield fury. It was a calculated operation that took years of planning and represented the culmination of Roman systematic warfare. By 149 BC, Carthage posed no military threat to Rome whatsoever. The city had been stripped of its navy decades earlier, forbidden from maintaining a significant army, forced to pay crushing tribute that had left its economy in ruins. But Senator Marcus Porcius Cato understood something that terrified him. As long as Carthaginian civilization existed, as long as there was an alternative to Roman culture, Roman values, Roman dominance, Rome could never claim absolute authority over the Mediterranean world. So he ended every single speech in the Senate, regardless of the topic being discussed, with the same 3 words. Carthago, the Lendized Carthage, must be destroyed. Not defeated, not conquered, destroyed. Picture yourself trapped behind those walls as a Carthaginian civilian. You are one of 500,000 people crowded into a city designed for far fewer, and you have been under siege for 3 years. The food ran out months ago. People are eating leather, boiling grass, consuming things that would have been unthinkable before the Romans came. Disease spreads through the overcrowded streets. Bodies pile up faster than they can be buried. Children die in their mother's arms from starvation. The elderly simply give up and wait for death. And through it all you can see the Roman camps surrounding your city, knowing that when they finally breach these walls, what awaits you is not capture or even quick death, but something far worse. When the walls finally fell in the spring of 146 BC, Scipio's soldiers moved through the city with the precision of men following explicit orders. This was not the chaos of battle. This was systematic extermination carried out with military efficiency. Roman forces had divided Carthage into sectors, assigned specific legions to clear each area, calculated body disposal, logistics with the same attention they gave to managing grain supplies. Families were dragged from their homes and butchered in the streets. The elderly were beaten to death with clubs. Pregnant women were cut open. Children were killed in front of their parents, not out of rage, but as a calculated method of breaking the spirit of survivors who would carry the memory of Roman power to the rest of the world. For 6 days and 6 nights, the killing continued without pause. Roman sources describe streets flowing with blood and the stench of decomposing bodies becoming so overwhelming that soldiers had to wrap cloth around their faces too. continue their work. 400,000 people systematically murdered. But Scipio was not finished. After the massacre ended, Roman forces spent 11 additional days systematically destroying every single building in Carthage. Libraries containing centuries of Phoenician literature were burned. Temples were torn down stone by stone. Art treasures were either looted for Rome or smashed into fragments. This was not destruction. This was erasure. And when the physical city had been reduced to rubble, Roman priests performed ceremonies cursing the very ground where Carthage had stood, ensuring that even its memory would be poisoned. The ashes of Carthage were still warm when news arrived in Rome of another city burning in the exact same year of 146 BC, on the other side of the Mediterranean. Roman forces under Lucius Mummius were systematically obliterating Corinth, one of the jewels of Greek civilization. This was not coincidence. This was coordinated extermination designed to send an unmistakable message to the entire ancient world. Rome's power was absolute. Resistance meant not just defeat, but the complete annihilation of everything you had ever built, everyone you had ever loved, and every trace that your civilization had ever existed. Corinth was not just another Greek city. It was the leader of the Achaean League, the last significant resistance to Roman domination of Greece, and it controlled the crucial trade routes between the Aegean and Ionian seas. It represented the pinnacle of Greek achievement in art, philosophy, and commerce. The Romans had learned from Carthage. They understood that to break Greek independence forever, they needed to eliminate not just military resistance but the very heart of Greek cultural identity. Every adult male in Corinth was systematically executed, regardless of whether they had raised a weapon against Rome. Roman military records coldly describe this as eliminating potential future leaders. The women and children faced something arguably worse. Rather than quick death, they were designated for slavery and systematic abuse designed to destroy Greek cultural identity across generations. The historian Pausanias provides haunting details of what happened to Corinthian families during those dark weeks. Children were deliberately separated from their mothers and sold to different masters across the empire, ensuring that family bonds and cultural memory would be severed forever. Women endured systematic violation by multiple soldiers before being shipped to slave markets where their Greek identity would be methodically erased. This was not the random cruelty of warfare. This was calculated cultural genocide carried out with bureaucratic precision. But the destruction of Corinth's people was only the beginning. Roman forces systematically looted the city's artistic treasures with the efficiency of modern art thieves, shipping masterpieces to Rome while destroying works too large or fragile to transport. Pliny the Elder records Roman soldiers using priceless Greek paintings as game boards and breaking ancient sculptures for entertainment. Libraries containing irreplaceable works of philosophy and mathematics were burned in massive bonfires that illuminated the night sky for days. After weeks of systematic looting and destruction, Roman engineers demolished every building in Corinth, using techniques that ensured the city could never rise again as a center of Greek culture. The demolition was recorded as an engineering project with specific objectives and timelines. Buildings were collapsed in predetermined sequences. Religious authorities performed ceremonies declaring the site cursed and uninhabitable. The message was received across Greece. Other cities that had considered resistance quickly submitted rather than face obliteration. The dual destruction of Carthage and Corinth in 146 BC marked the perfection of Roman systematic terror. But the machine was just warming up. Between 58 and 50 BC, Julius Caesar took everything Rome had learned about systematic extermination and applied it on an unprecedented scale during his conquest of Gaul. Caesar himself boasted in his own writings that he killed over 1 million Gauls and enslaved another million more. He was proud of this. He used these body counts to advance his political career in Rome, knowing that the Senate rewarded systematic brutality with triumph and glory. Caesar's Gallic wars were not defensive campaigns. They were deliberate wars of aggression designed to provide wealth, slaves, and military prestige. The systematic violence against Gallic populations was not an unfortunate consequence. It was central to his strategy. The Helvetii tribe attempted to migrate through Roman territory in 58 BC. Of the estimated 368,000 who began the journey, only 110,000 survived to be returned to their homeland as slaves. The rest were systematically hunted down and slaughtered. When the Eburones tribe dared to defeat a Roman legion, Caesar declared that the entire people must be eliminated. Roman forces spent months tracking down every man, woman, and child, continuing the massacre long after organized resistance had ended. This was extermination as policy. But the siege of Avaricum in 52 BC reveals the true depth of Caesar's calculated cruelty. This Gallic stronghold held approximately 40,000 inhabitants when Roman forces arrived. Caesar rejected all offers of surrender, declaring that the city must serve as an example to terrorize other communities. When the walls were finally breached, he ordered systematic execution of every person inside. For 3 days, Roman soldiers methodically worked their way through the city, killing inhabitants with assembly line efficiency. The elderly, children, those who had never held weapons, none were spared. Of 40,000 souls, only 800 survived, kept alive specifically to spread word of what Rome was capable of unleashing. Roman records describe the careful organization required to execute this many people efficiently. This was not rage. This was industrial killing refined into military doctrine. Caesar's campaign extended beyond battlefield casualties to target Gallic culture itself. Roman forces systematically destroyed temples, burned repositories of oral traditions, executed druids who preserved religious knowledge. Sacred groves were cut down, gathering places demolished, artifacts looted or destroyed. This was cultural extermination on a civilizational scale. The slave raids continued even in areas that had submitted to Roman authority. Entire communities were captured, families separated, survivors shipped to markets across the Mediterranean. Roman military logistics treated human beings as resources to be harvested with the same efficiency as grain. Quartermasters calculated slave quotas for each campaign and planned transportation accordingly. Human trafficking was integrated into Roman military planning as standard procedure. Modern demographic studies suggest Caesar's campaigns reduced the population of Gaul by approximately 1/3. An entire generation erased, countless communities obliterated, cultures that had existed for centuries systematically deleted from history. And in Rome, Caesar was celebrated as a hero. The Senate awarded him triumph after triumph. Poets composed verses praising his achievements. Citizens lined the streets to cheer the display of Gallic prisoners and treasure. When Scipio Aemilianus wept before burning Carthage, he understood something profound and terrifying. He knew that the machine of systematic terror Rome had built would not stop with foreign enemies. He knew that the techniques perfected on Carthaginians and Greeks and Gauls would eventually be turned inward. He knew that empires built on fear inevitably consume themselves. History proved him right. Within a century, Romans would be using these same methods against each other during brutal civil wars. The machine, once built, could not be shut down. It could only feed. So here is the question that should haunt us. We still celebrate Rome. We still teach children about Roman law and Roman engineering and Roman culture. We name our government buildings after Roman architecture. We quote Roman philosophers. We study Roman military tactics. But when do we talk about the 15 million dead? When do we acknowledge that every marble column was built on a foundation of systematic mass murder? When do we admit that the peace Rome brought was the peace of the graveyard, purchased with deliberate cultural genocide on a scale that would not be matched for 2,000 years? The Romans did not bring civilization to the ancient world. They brought systematic extermination, refined it into a science, and then convinced history to remember them as heroes. Leave a comment below and tell me honestly, how does it change your view of history knowing that one of our most celebrated civilizations was built on techniques of mass murder so systematic they would not be matched until the 20th century? Because if we cannot face the truth about the past, we cannot recognize it when it emerges in the present. That is the real horror Rome left us, not the ruins, not the records, but the template.